Now we're just talking about Star Wars Episode VII, The Force Awakens.
In theaters now.
Do it. You know you want to.
Spoilers. There are spoilers coming.
Yes, there should be like a gong of some sort to indicate that spoilers are coming. If you have not watched Star Wars The Force Awakens yet, first pause to mark your place, and then view said movie, and then return to your device, and then unpause, and then you can listen.
Yes.
Confident that you are caught up to date.
Yes. If hearing there is going to be a spoilers alerts you to the point where you are like one of the sand people who frightens easily, then it's time for you to go see the movie. And then to return in larger numbers with your friends as you listen to this podcast.
There's this great mass of people descending upon a single cell phone.
Yes, but you must definitely come to that cell phone in single file to hide your numbers.
I can't even express how long I've been waiting for this movie to finally come out.
Right. As I recall, actually, my first day of work at Y2AM was actually the day that they released the teaser at long last.
Is that right?
And so we were all standing in the Y2AM office, kind of crying a little bit. I guess my primary reaction to these movies is tears, but that's another story, probably for another time. But
we just fell upon each other's necks.
We all saw that it had been posted, and just silence fell on the room, and we needed to attend to it. To when it ended with Chewie, we're home. Because he wasn't just talking about him. He was talking about us. Like, we were home. We were all home right then. By the way, I'm wearing a Millennium Falcon t-shirt right now. I kind of wanted to get a little bit in the mood as a fanboy. And so I'm wearing my Millennium Falcon shirt right now.
I'm wearing Dockers and a sensible sweater and a button-up and a tie.
That's very, like, I don't know, Old Republic of you.
A sensible sweater, very Old Republic.
Very Old Republic. But yeah, when he said we're home, he wasn't just talking about himself. He was talking about all of us. I felt like I knew those halls. I knew those corridors in the Millennium Falcon. It just all felt so familiar. I was amazed by that.
By how familiar it felt?
Oh, man, all of it felt so familiar. It was the same ship. It was the same exact ship that we had spent so much time on in episodes 4 through 6.
Yeah, and that's why I think it was so cool, like a not so subtle nod. Even like the first line that is spoken in the movie is, "This will begin to make things right."
Right.
Which is so great because there's a couple of tensions that J.J. Abrams needed to navigate in this. And this is like so difficult to do, I think, artistically. When you have an established franchise, you need to be true to what the franchise is. But you also don't want to be too retro and too derivative and too same. You know, which is kind of what George Lucas was accusing Abrams of doing. He said Episode 7 was too retro and so forth, which I think is hogwash because what was needed was a return to like the Star Wars feel, and that's totally one of the things we lacked in the prequels. Like you can sit down and watch those movies, and it doesn't feel like you're watching a Star Wars movie.
Right, like when R2-D2 is flying through like the air, when he can barely move at all in episodes 4 through 6, it's very confusing.
It's weird and it's
silly.
Gimmicky. And,
it's silly.
Well, yeah, partly also because the whole thing was like CGI, and the thing just didn't feel like it was connected to anything tangible in the real world. I think there's a bunch of different factors that Abrams addressed when he made Episode 7, but from top to bottom, even like from the crawl, people have talked about how like personal the crawl was at the beginning because it's not about trade policy or anything like that. It's like Luke has vanished.
Right.
It's about a person, it's about a character, like it sets the stakes, and you understand exactly where you are from the very beginning.
And Leia's looking for him.
Yeah, it's people, familiar people doing things, and it's not grand causes or anything like that. Like it's the characters that you love, and they're still here, and just the feel of it, like it just felt, and I can't stress this enough, for the first time in a long time, it felt like watching a Star Wars movie, which is so refreshing. But not in a derivative sense, though. And like this is the cool thing of the way Abrams was able to thread this needle, because it felt familiar, but it's new characters and it's new conflicts that are moving the story forward. It was way more than a rehashing or a retelling of Episode 4. Like I think that's just kind of not very good movie criticism of Episode 7. Because, yeah, there are a couple of sort of like superficial themes that make it work, but it's a new story with a new character and a new sort of like character arc, because Rey is not Luke, and Rey is not going to develop like Luke, and like her internal conflicts are very different. And fine, she originated on a sand planet like Luke did. There was a giant spherical death machine that had to be shot out of the sky. Like, that's basically where the similarities ended. But it was like new conflicts, new people that were part of this universe.
And conversely, like, one of the things that I think was so wonderful about these films, and I actually had seen in some interviews with J.J. Abrams, and I loved this about the villain, about Kylo Ren, that he's a bad dude. You know, he's a bad dude. Mm-hmm. But he is not presented as this completed villain yet.
Oh, no.
You know, he's just still this little child in a lot of ways. I mean, when he starts throwing fits about things not going well, and yeah, exactly, which were hilarious, by the way. They just did that so well, I thought. And Adam Driver, just, man, what an amazing performance, I thought. I thought he nailed the complexity of the character when it would be really easy just to play him as a villain. I definitely got the fact that he was torn.
Yeah, because there was a lot of tension, because even there you see some of the similarities, obviously, to Darth Vader and the mask and the voice and everything. Even though it was really great that the mask was a unique thing, the voice was a unique thing, you know, it didn't try to mimic the Darth Vader kind of booming voice. Like, it had a more nasally sort of quality, which I think gets at some of his underlying adolescence. Mm-hmm. And then when the mask comes off, like, that's what you see. He is menacing insofar as he is pretty good at the Force, and he can do some terrifying things, but
right.
He's full of angst, and he's full of conflict, and he doesn't even know who he is.
Right. I thought it was brilliant all around. The development of his character, you know, seeing him kind of descend even further into the dark side, and then conversely Rey be the response to that, I thought was just awesome. It was awesome how they did that.
Yeah, but again, done in a different sort of way. Like, the cool thing about the character of Kylo Ren was that he was clearly being tempted, but the temptation that he was struggling with, it was his temptation back towards the light.
Yeah,
you know?
Weird.
Like, you have this weird thing of a character, so he's not like the prodigal son who is sick of the pods, right? Like, he wants to be bad. Like, he wants to be able to eat a vice and be satisfied by it, but it clearly doesn't. And he clearly has the echoes of the light side, and he clearly has something about his family drawing him in, and he wants to reject that, which is, I think, so relatable. We immerse ourselves in bad things because we feel like it is convenient. The allure of the dark side for him, as somebody who is so young, is that I guess it gives you such immediate power so quickly. Like, he's dangerous as an adolescent, more or less.
Yeah.
It didn't take him decades of training, presumably, to get to the point where he could force choke people and press their minds and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's a fast forward to power. It really is the fruit.
Yeah, he's basically the space wizard version of Ivan Karamazov.
Right? That was an interesting mashup of different themes.
But I mean, just that idea of wanting to like transcend and become powerful and better, like that immediate you get with like just the seeming power that comes from killing your father, you know, rejecting where you've come from to the point of destroying it.
An actual master of your own destiny, right? To sort of like remove any of the necessity of lineage or genetics and to be like a creature of your own creation. Like, he rejects his name. He's no longer Ben Solo, right? He makes himself Kylo Ren. And he rejects his parentage and his lineage. He even says when he's talking to Han that I destroyed your son.
He was weak like his father.
Yeah, it's this incredibly perverse act of creation, which isn't really a creation at all. It's an act of destruction. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing. It's set in the Star Wars universe, and that's why it's so cool, because these are things we didn't see in 4 through 6. These are definitely things we didn't see in 1 through 3. But it's there. It's part of that universe. It's the familiar expressed in a different sort of way.
The story, like you said, is timeless. All of a sudden, we're with them 30 years past when we saw them last, and we don't feel the need to wonder about it. And I was amazed with how well they bridged the old with the new. It's clearly like we're moving into this story about Rey, Kylo Ren, and, you know, to some degree Finn, but it seems to me like the main conflict is obviously going to be between Rey and Kylo Ren.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, if she goes to her little Jedi training at some point, you know, that not little, but like intensive, her intensive Jedi training, I should say, goes and does that with her little lightsaber on that little island, then I think we're going to end up seeing what we saw this time, that she's going to lose another mentor. And we're going to see that it's the hero's journey. And now we have this awesome heroine. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
She's a super cool figure.
Totally. And she's not scared. And I read this thing too about like, we don't need these movies to tell girls that, oh, look, you can be a hero too, or whatever. The reality is, in girls' imaginations, and as the father of two girls, like I want this to be the case for my girls, is that they see themselves as the heroes of the story. They're not the ones who are in distress, who are waiting for like someone to come save them. They're the ones who are the heroes. And then what you have in Rey is she's just the hero. Yeah. She's just doing awesome things. She's like, I'm a pilot and I know how to use a lightsaber, having never studied it before because the Force is strong with me. And watch me do this mind Jedi trick on Daniel Craig. Which, by the way, that Stormtrooper was Daniel Craig, right?
Yeah, what is it? He was
and I'll drop my weapon. No way. Was that really what his name was?
I think his designation was JB007. That was his designation.
No way.
Like Finn's Stormtrooper character was FN. What was it? Yeah,
2187.
2187, right?
Yeah, which is the holding cell that Leia was in A New Hope. Yeah, 2187 was the holding cell that Leia was in A New Hope.
Again, because there's a difference between nostalgia and fan service. Right? There's a difference between hearkening back to something that was and connecting it versus just giving you things that are like food for people who have already watched the movie and bought into it. Like this is, I think, a key difference between the prequels and Episode VII. Like Episode VII just kind of threw things in there and didn't really do it in a plausible sort of way. Like, here's how Darth Vader got his mask, right? It throws things in for the sake of throwing them in and doesn't even do it in a particularly artistic sort of way, whereas this was just like subtle nods to the fact that we're in the same universe. I think probably the most heavy-handed use of that was the chessboard in the Millennium Falcon. We probably didn't need to see it turn on, right? We probably didn't need to see it turn on and have the figures play. Like, if you saw the movies, like, you get it, you understand what it is. With that aside, I thought everything else was like pretty subtle and pretty just organic and lived in and nice.
Agreed. Totally agreed. So, can we both agree that we loved it? That the movie was just fantastic?
Hated it. No, I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Hated it. The worst. I would take Attack of the Clones over this anytime.
Oh, you were so fired.
Hayden Christensen should have been hired instead of Adam Driver.
Oh my goodness, no.
Give me more of Hayden Christensen. More.
This will begin to make things right.
I wish this movie would have been a crossover with Jumper. So one of the things that you mentioned before we sat down to have this recording was the running theme of like family throughout the whole thing. I want to hear your thoughts on that because episodes 1 through 9 really are just the story of the family, which is why, by the way, when we'll get to this a little bit later, maybe we can talk about what we think is going to happen in episodes 8 and 9. But why I think Rey has to be a Skywalker. I think she absolutely has to be a Skywalker. But anyway, tell me your thoughts on the family things.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, like you said, the theme of family just kind of goes through, right? Because from the very beginning, you have, depends on how you define the beginning, I guess. If you go back to episode 4, like one of the things that you have is this boy who is disconnected from his roots and finally finds his place. And one of the central dramas in Luke's arc is discovering that he, who is struggling to move towards the light, is the son of Vader, right? Who is like one of the epitomes of the dark side. But if you go back further, like this is the whole struggle of the Skywalker family, ultimately. The struggle of the Skywalker family, which sort of originates from nowhere in episode 1 and is taken, and like there are these grand hopes that Anakin is going to be the promised one or the chosen one, and that sort of falls apart. And then he has this son and this daughter, and like, is the son the chosen one? I mean, like the connection of people in a wider narrative, which is very like Tolkien-esque in a sense. It's like Frodo when he talks about how we're just kind of chapters in a larger story. Like that's clearly who these characters are. And they're specifically characters in a larger family drama. And then you get to episode 7 and like that's kind of the basic struggle that Rey and that Kylo Ren and that Finn all have to deal with, right? Because Rey is left behind by somebody and one of her struggles is figuring out like who is she, which we'll get to later. You have your theory. And Finn is like a child janissary. Finn has a family that he will never know. He's taken from his family and made into a stormtrooper against his will. And then you have Kylo Ren, who like knows his family and actively chooses to reject them to the point of actually killing his father. It's very fascinating. All of these are kind of like family dramas in like a really deep sense.
You know, you touched on it's kind of like the Skywalker family thing. They're definitely a struggling family in this particular way, and I think it's in Deuteronomy where There's that verse that speaks of the sins of the fathers being visited upon the children for like 4 generations or something like that. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. This sense of like generational struggle and generational sin. It's pretty clear, right? Like Anakin succumbed and then sort of found his way back. Luke was definitely tempted. I was a little disappointed that he didn't full on go to the dark side. I kind of was hoping that that's what we were going to see at the beginning of this. I'm not going to lie about that. But he definitely had the temptation in the draw, and in the end, the Harry Potter effect kind of won him over as he saw his father's act of sacrifice. But now you have Kylo Ren, who's the grandson of Darth Vader, taking up the helm a little bit and very explicitly saying, I'm going to finish what you started. Mm-hmm. Which Abrams has said that it's because that Ren, he's a big fanboy of Darth Vader, but not so much of Anakin Skywalker. That he considered Anakin to be weak, while Darth Vader is his role model. He goes to bed with Darth Vader posters hanging over his bed.
Which is interesting, of course, because in the same way that Vader kills Anakin, Anakin in a very real way kills Vader as well. And Anakin finally puts the Vader persona away at the end of Episode VI and takes the mask off and all of that. So it's kind of curious why Ren doesn't accept that, or why Ren doesn't acknowledge that. Why he's moving towards Vader and sort of chooses to overlook that pivotal moment of redemption at the end of Anakin's life.
He seems to think that Vader was seduced by the light side.
Which is his main conflict, right?
Which is his main conflict. And so his fear, right, as Rey at one point says, is that he's not going to be as strong as Darth Vader, so that he also would be seduced by the light side. Yeah. So, he has that internal conflict. And unlike Darth Vader, right, where you see him at the end of Return of the Jedi, as he's watching his son be killed by the Emperor, steps in and decides to save his blood, to save his tie. He doesn't renounce that familial tie in the end. He actually ends up it being the cause of his salvation, his redemption. Whereas for Kylo Ren, it sort of seals his fate, I think, toward the dark side. Which, I don't know, maybe we'll see that that's not the case, but I sort of think that we already saw the light fade from him. In that shot, he has that little beam of light on his head, which goes away just before he kills Han Solo.
Oh, yeah, when they're standing on the walkway, yeah.
Yeah, which was, I thought, really, really beautifully shot, that whole scene. But
oh, yeah. The contrast is really strong, too, right? Because you have the blood that's on Ren's hands as he kills Solo, right? He immerses himself headlong into the dark side. And you have, the really strong contrast, I feel like, with Finn, because Finn is a stormtrooper, but he ducks out, in his first battle. His hands never get dirty, which I'm not sure about that. I wonder if it's too safe to kind of really play those extremes and to not have him be, a really repentant stormtrooper, but he just gets out at his earliest opportunity. I don't know. But clearly we see a conflict. We see Finn gets out as soon as he can and is pretty uncorrupted by the First Order, all things considered. And Ren, on the other hand, he takes every opportunity that he can to sink deeper and deeper into the darkness.
Right.
But the family thing is interesting, though, too, because I think people sometimes misinterpret that scripture, and I think we think about it in terms of, judgment being rained down upon somebody's head, the children are being punished for the sins of the father. And I think you see it in the Star Wars. It's not so much that the children and the grandchildren unto the 4th generation are being punished, but there are consequences to sin, and there are consequences to shortcomings and mistakes. Even with Ren, I would imagine that some of his character development, and you don't see it, is probably because of the sort of father that Solo was, or maybe wasn't.
He even says that at one point, right? When he's reading Rey's mind, he says, in Han Solo, it feels like the father you never had. He would have been a disappointment.
Yeah.
He would have been disappointed.
Exactly. Han's shortcomings end up bearing fruit, in a sense, with his kid. And if you want to go back further, too, Luke's shortcomings, right? Luke's failure to really complete his training to the extent that it should have is probably, I would imagine, one of the reasons why he wasn't able to actually train that next generation of Jedi as well as he could.
Right. They all wanted to go the easy way. Right, that's what Yoda says to him. If you leave now, if you take the easy way,
which is what they did. It seems like
it's definitely what Anakin does.
It's definitely what Anakin does. It's what Luke struggles with as well, and then it's kind of what Ren struggles with later. Because, I think that's the reason why he chooses the dark side as an adolescent. He's an untrained youth who seeks power, and that's the quick way to get it. But even there again, Luke is not being punished for Anakin's fall, but Anakin's fall has consequences. And then Luke's descendants, and we can call his nephew part of that as well, they're not being punished for Luke's rashness, but it echoes out into the future. And that's cool. I think that's one of the great things about this being a saga. Like, again, it's that Frodo bit from Lord of the Rings that we do live in a context that is shaped by what came before us. We live in a world where Adam and Eve sinned. Like, that's the world in which we live. Ren lives in a world where Anakin made this mistake, and Luke made that mistake, and Han made that mistake. It's just the world into which he lives.
He's a recipient of a legacy of some kind.
Yeah, and that affects him. That affects his potential. It's not to say that it's insurmountable. Like, I'm sure he could have made a different choice. Like, Kylo Ren could have chosen to succumb to the light, but he fought it pretty hard. And we'll see. I don't know. Maybe he is beyond redemption at this point. I hope not. It'll definitely be a tough thing to get his character arc moving in that direction again.
Yeah, especially now that we have Snoke at the end of the movie saying, "Bring Kylo Ren to me. It's time to complete his training."
Yeah.
Which, like, this is just where he is probably not necessarily the beginning of his training in the dark side, but if this is just at least the leading up to the end, up to the completed training, then, man.
I'm super curious because I also want to know who Snoke is. I want to know how it is that when all the Sith were destroyed, like, who is he? How does he know how to use the Force? What is his connection to what came before, which is plenty of other fruit for kind of interesting speculation.
Yeah. Oof. Which even the whole thing of the Force, right? Like, one of the other things that you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about was the sense of mysticism, which I was so grateful to not have heard the word midichlorian in this.
Yes.
Thing. The idea that this transcendent force, this power that is in all things and flows through all things. I mean, it's such a reductionism to say it's this thing that, you have this amount of white blood cells that lets you, like, move things with your brain. And it's just so ridiculous. It's just very silly to turn it into such an imminent kind of expression of something. But the return in this one, with that Oracle character whose name I can't remember.
Oh, yeah, with an M, Maz something, right?
Yeah, something. But she was awesome, first of all.
Oh, she was, yeah.
She was so awesome. And when she has that moment with Rey after Rey's had her vision, which is a whole nother can of worms to talk about, when she goes, "I'm no Jedi, but I know the Force. Close your eyes, it's around us. Do you feel it? Like, feel it." There's just that. It's just here. It's with us. I was so grateful for those moments. Yeah, that was another one of those, like, really emotional moments for me in that movie. To see her just delight in the light. When she says, "The light, close your eyes, feel the light. It's always been with you."
Yeah. Yeah, this thing that is not, like you said, quantifiable or reducible to something that you can, like, easily grasp. I think, like, this is the reason why we love fantasy and why we love magic, because there are no kind of limits on it, and as a viewer, it's very easy to be able to, like, throw yourself into this world of possibility. This is why the Force is such a wonderful thing, and this is why generations of kids have been drawn to lightsabers and, like, Force battles and things like that, because it's cool and it's fascinating and it's something that you can't fully describe or fully put your finger on, and it's something that just kind of makes the world a more marvelous and shiny and magical place than it otherwise would be. And that was the incredible lack of sense in talking about midichlorians and making the Force a genetic property. It removes the wonder from it, and so much of the experience of a piece of art and so much of the, I think, our, as an audience, ability to throw ourselves into this piece of art is, like, there has to be an element of wonder. It's got to be an ocean into which we can pitch ourselves. It can't just be like a thimble full of water. When we define things and we constrain them, we put it into a very, very tiny box, and there's no room for the imagination to roam.
We take the experience of the ocean away and turn it into a chemical formula for H2O.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Boring.
And there's no space for me to see myself in this story. There's no space for my imagination to wander. And this is a cool thing that J.J. Abrams gets. And I think he gave a TED Talk on this one time. It's like a really central, pivotal choice that he made in his life. He got this, like, magic box set when he was a kid.
Yeah.
You've heard this before?
Yeah, from his grandpa or something.
Yeah, and it's got, like, a box with a question mark on it, and he got it for his birthday as a kid, and he still to this day, or at least as of the recording of the TED Talk, hasn't opened it, because whatever is in there is not going to be as full of possibility and wonder as years and years, decades and decades of imagination will be.
Right.
And that's what a story needs. A story needs room for the imagination of the audience to be able to roam free, and for the audience member to kind of be a co-creator in the wonder of the story.
Right, which is ultimately, I think, is why people were dissatisfied with Lost.
Yeah.
Because there were so many things left up in the air, and it's just like, well, I don't know, it's just the way things are. It's the way things are in that world. You know, in the universe of Lost, things are this way. I mean, what answer ultimately would be satisfying? Even the answers that Lost did give were not satisfying. You know, when they started talking about the electromagnetic properties of the island, you're like, okay. But if you just say, because it's a magic island, like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'm on board with that. I can suspend enough disbelief to go with it's just a magic island, and that's just how it works. It's just the Force. Like, it just is. It is what it is, and it can make you, you know, summon a lightsaber, and some people are better at it than others.
Now let's move on.
Yeah.
You know,
and also, you can maybe kind of see into the future, and also, you can do everything with it. You can jump higher, run fast. It's basically like the PF Flyers of mysticism.
Which is awesome, because like that's what allows the plot to develop.
Right. And some of us are Benny the Jet Rodriguez of the Star Wars galaxy. Others of us are not.
Just put your glove here.
Yeah.
Just trust me.
I'll take care of the rest. Oh, dude, he used the Force. That's how he did it.
I don't know. I think that's a really important observation about the Force, and why it's so good, and why like it's so good also that not everything is answered in this first movie. I mean, in a practical sense, it allows us to move into episodes 8 and 9. But again, just in a wonder sort of sense, it allows our imaginations to develop, and it really creates an appetite for the next movies. And like I said, it makes us co-creators in this world. You know, I feel like any good piece of art is going to inspire some fan art. A good piece of art is not going to simply make you passive. You're going to move in some sort of way, even if it's not like outward creation, like your imagination is at least going to be stirred. And this is what it's doing for us. I mean, like the fact that we're sitting here talking about it is a testament to its power as a piece of art, that we're dedicating our time to like considering this, not simply from an artistic point of view, but even from a theological and a philosophical point of view.
Yeah, there's something that inspires in us to ask questions about our own humanity. I guess that's why even not only the mysticism of the dark side, or the mysticism of the Force, I also mean that duality of the dark side and the light side, wherein we, I think, all have experienced that tension, you know, of being simultaneously pulled toward the light and toward the dark. And oftentimes, which I always think is very interesting, and I try to remember in my own life, that fear is the path to the dark side. Mm-hmm. It really is, because like when we become afraid, we want to control things, and we realize how much power we don't have to control things. And so we try to take power, and that usually ends up leaving others powerless and being our victims, because we've just been afraid, and we lose our own humanity in that way. I don't know, the path to the dark side, that whole journey, while, you know, you look at it in the context of Star Wars, when Obi-Wan says in, I think it's maybe episode 4, he says about Darth Vader, he's more machine than man, that there's that reality to our lives, you know, that we become so afraid either of like loneliness or afraid of death in whatever kind of capacity it rears its head, that we come up with all these different ways of seizing power that actually end up making us more machine than man. Whatever our preferred technology may be, our preferred addiction. It's very interesting to me.
It is, and I forget who said it, but it's kind of like a theme, like a patristic kind of theme, that in the same way that Adam and Eve, like they sinned and they brought death into the world, we sin because we die and because death is like a fundamental fact about the world, because that's ultimately why fear motivates us, right? Fear of insecurity, fear of lack of power, fear of our own mortality. It's all ultimately fear of death. I feel like, you know, this is what motivated Anakin, right, in the first trilogy. It was his fear of losing Padme. This is what seems to motivate Ren. I mean, his desire for power and order, because he's afraid of the opposite. Like, that's the whole First Order is really about order again, right? Like, which was Vader's dream when he wanted to rule the galaxy with Luke, right? To impose order, because the opposite is uncertainty, and uncertainty is risk, and risk is what leads to death and destruction. It's our own fallibility and our own mortality that leads us into sin. We inherit this fallen world. We inherit the sin of our fathers. You know, Luke inherits the sin of Anakin. Ren inherits the sin of Luke and Han and all of those who came before him, and we perpetuate it.
Conversely, right, like then the thing that makes the light so powerful, especially what you see in Rey, right, like she just kind of chills out, you know, when she's trying to control the guy because she's afraid, when she's trying to control Daniel Craig, he's resistant to it, but she kind of has this moment where she just checks into the Force and becomes really like, it's not even strong, it's just like a kind of confidence of, you will release the restraints and leave with the door open.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a very cool, calm collectness to her, which, not saying that like if we're just cool, calm, and collect, people will do what we want. In fact, quite the opposite, usually. But there is a certain sense of like a flow that kind of shows up with the world and not being afraid of the dark side because of the light. I don't know. I'm very fascinated by it.
Yeah, it is very cool. And it's so awesome to see these people struggle with it, these fully fleshed out three-dimensional characters. Like this is another thing that really strikes me about this movie, that we're dealing with people, you know, with really fleshed out characters, not causes. Like this kind of goes back to the point that you were making about Rey before and why Rey is such an awesome character, because she's a real person. And she's a person with motivations, and she sort of like doesn't fit into any of the preconceived stereotypes about what a damsel in distress needs to be or anything along those lines.
Right. She's like, don't touch me. Let go of my hand.
Yeah. You know, like why do we have to be put into these boxes of hero and heroine and damsel in distress and things like that? Like she's just a person, and she's just doing her best, and she is actually quite good at it. She's better at it than the guys are.
When Finn runs over to try to save her, and she's just like totally got it on her own. And he stops, and he just kind of just doesn't really know what to do. And then she totally bolts after him.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
Like, yeah, it's that moment of awkwardness, right? Like, I need to sweep in and save the day. Oh, I guess I don't. And now I need to run. One of my critiques of the movie is that I do wish there was a little bit more context to give in to the geopolitics and the background of all of this. Because it's not really clear, how does the First Order relate to the Empire? And like the Republic is there, but there's this resistance, which is sort of affiliated with the Republic, but not really. How do all these pieces fit together, I think is a little bit unclear. I don't know if you've figured it out more than I have, but after at least 2 viewings, it's like, I don't know, not really fleshed out, which I think is a negative. But it's also redeemed because none of these characters, I think, is reduced to like archetypes. None of these characters is like simply there because of the mechanics of the plot. They're people. They're people with their own struggles. And like you said before, even with Finn, like who knows where Finn's character is going to go in the next episode or how big of a role he's going to have. He was central here, but it seems like the central tension is really going to be between Rey and Ren. But even so, like he's a living, breathing person with motivation and struggle, and he's not simply there to fill a particular role. And that's kind of something that I really didn't like about the prequels. Like, Anakin didn't feel like a human being. He just felt like a vehicle to get us to Darth Vader.
Totally.
Even the other ones, right? Like, we're not playing types. Like, Poe Dameron, the pilot, like, he's clearly not just a Han Solo type because he's different. He's got a different sort of humor. He's got a sort of...
nobility.
Nobility and an optimism to it, right? He doesn't have the piracy and the cynicism that Han has, even though he has some of the same kind of swagger.
I was actually really grieved that we didn't get to see more of him in action. He was definitely, like, one of my favorite characters in the movie.
He was a very good character. And it's great because you feel like you get him. Like, I feel like after watching the movie, I kind of get who Poe is as a person, right? I feel like I kind of get who Ren is as a person. They're not just pieces on the board. They're people. It's another reason why this universe is so magical, because people are really deep mysteries, and people are so much more interesting because they're so much deeper than just kind of causes. This is a character drama. This is not simply like the prequel kind of was, where it's simply chess pieces that are moving us to the grand reveal of Darth Vader, or chess pieces that are moving us to the fall of the Republic. Like, there's no agenda behind them. They're people, and we're kind of watching their journey.
Yeah, and in this, I think what you really see, too, is some stress on who they are in a different way than maybe we've seen in Star Wars before. Like, we saw Han Solo and Leia, that they broke up, which is what happens. I kind of anticipated that we would see them together and he'd still be fighting with her. And I actually was like, oh, I'm kind of relieved that they're not together, actually, because that smacks of reality. You know, it's just these people doing the same things that kind of happen, but just in a different universe. You know, much in the way that if we all had the Force and were is tempted to the dark side in the same way, we might also hear about more people killing their fathers. It just seems like the cosmic battle for the human soul is just as real in the Star Wars universe, and that kind of helps, I think, elucidate our own struggles in a way that's a lot more colorful and a lot more fun and magical. You have Rey, who was stripped from her family, and you have Finn, who was stripped from his family, and you have Ren, who's trying to strip himself from his family. That there's like this kind of this commonality of loss and how it's affected each of them. I don't know. I look at our own lives, you know, like here we are as two men who are married, and like what would we be without the people in our lives that are our family? Mm-hmm. You know, like we just wouldn't be who we are. And I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy to see how that plays out even just in that little universe. I'm excited for what's ahead. Yeah,
it's great because we're seeing so many different kinds of real people. Like you said before, the fact that Rey is a woman, the fact that the main protagonist of this story is now a woman, a non-stereotypical, three-dimensional actual person, right? Mm-hmm. It's huge and it's different, and it's kind of one of the interesting dynamics that lurks beneath the surface of the Empire and kind of the forces of evil versus the forces of good. The forces of evil, the Empire, and now the First Order is way more homogenous. It's kind of like a visual manifestation of the way they deny the personhood of the people they oppress. The Empire and the First Order, like they're just humans, right? There's never any room for aliens or other sort of like diversity of creation. Whereas if you look at Jedi, there's Jedi from every planet and every sort of whatever. And now we're kind of seeing in a very real sense, like the fact that a woman is the main character, the fact that a black guy is the sort of the other main protagonist. It's refreshing. Mm-hmm. It's refreshing to see like these real people presented. It allows so many other now generations of kids to be able to look up and see themselves as parts of the story. Like it's really cool.
It is cool. And we just watched A New Hope with my 5-year-old, who, by the way, could not have cried more when Obi-Wan Kenobi died. Like, could not have been more distraught about it. But she was really into it. I don't know if she was into it because she knew I was into it. And she wanted to be like, look, I'm into it too, Dad. Or she really was enjoying it. But I think she was really interested in who the people were, and she was really interested in where they were going and what spaceship was good and who were the good guys and who was the bad guy and who Darth Vader is and why he's so mad and like all those kinds of things, you know. That's how story speaks to us, is it just gives us like visions of what heroism looks like. You know, we've done the same thing in Star Wars for the first of the initial episodes of each trilogy where the mentor figure is killed.
Yeah.
Like it just happens all over the place. That's the journey. We all end up having to go alone. Stories kind of present us with a way that invokes like the pain of that in a really visceral way, but also shines a light on the fact that that's just the truth of our lives. Like we're all on a journey that we're going to have to finish alone.
Yeah.
As scary as it is, but.
And that's the beauty of art, ultimately, right? Like you watch these movies and you learn something about the human condition. You watch some of these movies and you learn something about yourself. That's like the whole point of being the bee on some level, is to be able to look at anything and to be able to draw something out. And I watch something like Star Wars and I get so excited about it because, it's not like a piece of philosophy, or it's not a piece of theology, or it's not something like inherently didactic, or it's not something that is even kind of like inherently within the teaching authority of the church, but like it reflects something true about humanity, as any piece of art inherently will. It reflects something dark about humanity, but it reflects something optimistic and hopeful about humanity. I think that's sort of the closure of being able to watch a really satisfying and a great piece of art. You are in touch with who you are in a way that you wouldn't have absent the cultural language of seeing these kinds of characters and these very human stories, which on some level are very universal, being acted out on this stage, because it illumines like your own human story that you're in the process of acting out.
So who's Rey?
So I'm torn about this because I think there's two answers to this. Like, who do I kind of want Rey to be, and who do I think Rey is? So in terms of who I want Rey to be, like part of me does want Rey to be the daughter of Han and Leia, because I think there's something poetic about that schism in the Force, like brother against sister, It really symbolizes the deep divisions even within the Skywalker lineage, the deep sort of fractures that exist within human character, how somebody is intimately related as brother and sister can have this incredible rift between them, right? Like the very metaphorical rift that develops after the lightsaber duel between Rey and Ren, which I felt was kind of very in your face, right? Like, this is a metaphor, right?
Right.
So part of me kind of wants that. Part of me wants this division to run that deep, and it not to be like a fight between cousins, but to be a fight between brother and sister, because that somehow like strikes closer to the nerve. The other part of me, though, wants Rey to be a Kenobi. Like, have you seen that fan theory that's floating around out there?
Yeah.
Because there's like just a beautiful symmetry to it, to see now a Skywalker teach a Kenobi, and like you have kind of like an inversion of the way that the original trilogy sort of went. So that's beautiful. But I mean, practically speaking, in terms of the clues that we see in the movie, I think I'm in your camp, and I think that Rey is probably a Skywalker.
Yeah, totally. The Kenobi theory I thought was like compelling, but not compelling enough to kind of fit in with the rest of the story, just because I think the whole thing really to me seems to be about the Skywalkers. It's the fall of Anakin, the redemption of Anakin, and now it's going to be like through Anakin that balance comes to the Force because of the two grandchildren that he has. Probably, I really want her to be Han and Leia's kid. I don't think she is, though. Because, again, I'm with you. I think that the brother-sister thing is way more compelling than cousins. I feel like Han and Leia would have mentioned, like, and not to mention that he killed our little girl.
Yeah, well...
Unless they got mind-wiped or something, but I don't know about that.
Yeah, true. The things that makes me hold out hope that it might be, though, is like the way that Leia embraces Rey at the very end. And like, you don't really get a lot of on-screen interaction between them, but there's like something that seems to draw Leia to Rey.
Right, they're having some conversation at the end after the hug. You know, before she gets back on there. She's like, "Hey, Rey, may the Fourth be with you."
That's not how she talks.
Like that. Sorry. "Hey, Rey, may the Force be with you."
And also with you.
And with thy spirit. That's always what I expect them to say in response to, like, may the Force be with you. And with your spirit. Awesome. But, yeah, I don't know. I think just the fact that, like, they don't ever mention that they had a little girl. But that said, I do definitely think she was there when Kylo Ren slaughtered the Jedi. I think that a lot of what she is seeing when she touches the lightsaber is both a look into her future and a look into her past.
You think they're memories, or you think that there's something that the Force is sort of bringing to her?
I think they're memories, and then I also think they're premonitions. She sees Ren in the snow, which is where they have that final duel. So I think that that's a premonition. But I think that the rest of it is memories. When she sees Luke reach out and touch R2, I think that presumably it's Luke, that's Luke probably having just shown up, having found all the slaughtered Jedi. Because, you know, she's there in the rain when Kylo Ren is standing over all the dead bodies. So I think that's a memory that she has.
Interesting.
That is from when she was a wee lass.
Yeah, a wee lass.
And she is either was so traumatized by it that she forgot it, or she was so young that she forgot it.
Yeah.
It's just been so many years.
Makes
she
sense,
was pretty
right?
wee when she was being taken away, man. She was teeny tiny. Yeah. Also, did you notice that the voice in the hand was the guy who was the junkyard guy?
Oh, I didn't.
One half portion.
Oh,
that guy.
Yeah.
It was him.
Yeah.
So I wonder if he's some sort of guardian for her.
Interesting, because he seems very, at least when you see him kind of in the contemporaneous action, he does seem like something of a villain. Like he sends people out to go get BB-8, right? So I don't know if his character has kind of an arc and goes from being a protector to something else, or if I'm misreading the situation, I'm not sure.
Unless he's trying to protect her from the First Order.
Oh, and take the droid away from her? Maybe, yeah. Maybe, that's a possibility. There's something there, like the fact that she has the little X-Wing pilot doll and the fact that she has the X-Wing pilot helmet. There's got to be some sort of like pilot in her past, and Luke clearly was at some point.
So is Obi-Wan.
Yeah, so is Obi-Wan. I don't know. I wish we could sort of get more out of that final scene. That final scene, which does take a little bit too long, yes, of them standing on the mountaintop and just looking at each other. I wish there was more that we can extrapolate from it, but we'll see in, May of 2017?
Yeah, and not soon enough.
Oh, I know.
But I want it now!
You you're going to start us off, and we're going to go with the top 5 Star Wars lines of all time.
Yes.
This is so hard to like narrow down, by the way, and I feel like it's even
so
harder
many.
than asking characters or harder than asking something else because it's just pithier and it's wittier. And I don't know, you go first.
Okay, so my number 5 is Luke's line from A New Hope.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Why?
Just because it cracks me up every time he says it. And I can't help but say it with him. When we were watching it with my little girl, I couldn't help it. But I was going to go to Dodgy and then just Uncle Owen's response of like, you can waste time with your friends when your chores are done. It's all so funny to me. It's all very, very funny. And I get it. I totally understand how he feels, too, in that moment. But I was gonna...
So that's the Skywalker wine.
And what's he doing with those power converters?
Who knows?
Is he building a ship?
He's building another droid.
It's just very funny. I was going to go into Tashi Station to pick up some power converters. Yes.
Ridiculous. Okay, am I up?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go with Han Solo himself, and I'm going to go with a line that he has in Empire, where Leia says, as he's getting ready to be thrown into carbonite, he passes Leia, and Leia says, "I love you," and Han looks her right in the eye, and he says, "I know."
I love you.
I know.
And
Yeah.
I love that line because like it's so simple and it's pithy, and it's just kind of like really just cocksure in the way that Han sort of is. It's such a piece in his character development over time. I love the character of Han because he shot first, right? He was a pirate, and he was this person who's out there for himself, and eventually he gets to the point where he sort of acknowledges the love of the other, but then his character keeps moving, and he's able to eventually reciprocate that love, and he becomes like a general who's willing to fight and die for his friends.
Right.
Like, he really comes full circle in a way that few characters do. From this totally self-centered person to this person who, like, love finally begins to kind of crack at this wall that he's developed for himself, and then he becomes this selfless hero. But the tragedy is that as we fast forward now to Episode 7, like, he does kind of regress. And after Ren sort of goes away to the dark side, he becomes estranged from Leia, and he becomes estranged from the heroic self that he became. Like at one point when Rey says, like, "You're Han Solo," and he goes, "I used to be."
Yeah.
And I think that's not simply a commentary on his age, but it's a commentary on his like fall from grace in a sense. Which, P.S., he totally makes up at the very end. Because not only does he walk out onto the gangway to confront his son, he calls him by his name, right? And he goes back to him, and then Ren runs him through with a lightsaber, and he doesn't get angry. He touches his face
It's bringing me all the feels again. It's bringing me all the feels.
with this fatherly like gesture of not quite forgiveness necessarily, but just kind of like tenderness and sadness. And like, I'm not angry at you. I wish it wasn't this way.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, I'm not going to hold this against you. Maybe it is a bit of forgiveness as well, and he plummets. In that moment, I feel like Han, like, re-achieves his Han-ness.
I know. So good. Also, just for a fun fact, I Love You, I Know was unscripted.
Yes, well, I've looked into this before. Either it was unscripted, or some other sources say that they kind of worked it through. It was a modification to the script, so it wasn't, like, totally improvised. But it was definitely like Ford wrote it. Either way, it originated with Harrison Ford.
Right.
Which is cool.
Not how the moment played out originally.
No. And that's the cool thing about a creative process like making a movie. The actors who bring these characters to life can sometimes have insights into a character that a writer may not.
Yeah, he wouldn't say that. That's not what he would say right now.
Yeah, which is super cool.
So number 3, you're choosing all these like really cool lines, and I'm choosing the silly ones. But it's okay because I love the lines, and they're always the ones that I hear, so it is what it is. I have to give like an honorable mention to your Tauntaun will freeze before you reach the first marker. But what I'm going to point to now is when Princess Leia says,
Why, you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder.
definitely just one of the best insults of all time. It's in this one moment where you kind of realize you're in a different galaxy. Like, I don't know what a nerf herder is, but I do gather that it's like some sort of Star Wars galaxy redneck. You know, that maybe nerf is a delicious kind of cattle type thing, but I Also would not be surprised to find out that it's some equally grotesque kind of like Jabba the Hutt type thing. But either way, he stuck up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder. Which,
Who
of
you
course, he
calling
responds.
scruffy?
Yeah. Who's scruffy-looking? Yeah.
That is funny.
Yeah.
And again, that's their wonderful sort of dynamic that exists.
Right. And not to mention the number of times that Han Solo says, not this guy's sister, or says something along the lines of just calling her sister. Not this ship's sister.
So a note about humor, P.S., because we're sort of like mentioning it now. A kind of criticism I had of the movie, because humor is a part of the Star Wars universe, and there's plenty of quips that happen in the episodes before. I feel like the humor in Episode 7 was a little bit too sassy and a little bit too contemporary at times. And it's the humor that really made me feel like sometimes I was watching a Disney property, which is not a bad thing, obviously, because Disney movies are great. But like there were certain lines by like Finn especially, which felt too 2015 or too 2014.
Like when you say you got a boyfriend, a cute boyfriend?
Like the one where he has this sort of like bravado in front of, I'm trying to remember the
I'm in
specific
charge
lines.
now. I'm in charge, Phasma.
Yeah, I worry that that's going to be dated in the future. That's sort of one of my criticisms about the humor, that the humor sometimes seemed a little bit too like 2015, things that are funny right now moment. Like
Sure.
they tried too hard to be contemporary. So that's my one quibble about the way they did humor. But anyway, moving on to number 2. I'm going to go with Empire again because of the first 6 movies, Empire is definitely the best one, 100%.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And I'm going to go with Yoda from Empire.
Try not. Do. Or do not. There is no try.
I love that line because of its clarity, right? Like, we make so many excuses for ourselves, and we talk about how we're going to try to do something. There is no try. There's simply do or do not. You will achieve the light or you will not. You will achieve the dark side or you will not. You will accomplish this thing or you will not. Like, it's this very weighty and, like, heavy and just sobering line that comes from this tiny figure. It's such a monumental challenge to see the world as the things that you accomplish and the things that you have not. It's weighty, but it's also hopeful because there's no try, right? Like there's do not, but then you can pick yourself back up and you can do again. And I love that. It's like, for me, it's kind of the seriousness and the optimism and like some of the hope that rings throughout this. There's no half measures. There's no try. There's simply do or do not. And that leads to really some of like the serious choices that exist in this movie. Like even Episode 7 and Ren doing the terrible thing that he did, like there's no try, there's simply do.
Yep.
And he did something terrible, but he did it, and now we're going to see how those consequences unfold.
Yep. Yeah, we will.
Boom. Woo. May of 2017.
Ooh. Let the countdown begin. And finally, my number 1, I think the best Star Wars and the most important Star Wars quote of all time is from Return of the Jedi, because it applies to almost any circumstance you could think of, wherein Admiral Akbar says,
It's a trap!
Yep.
Those are words to live by.
Indeed. Like, I mean, there's so many moments when I feel like it's a trap. No matter what I say right now, I should just not answer because whatever I say, it's a trap. This is a trap.
And honestly, where would you be if you didn't have a giant fish monster to alert you to the fact that it is a trap?
For sure. Like when my little one asks, what's for dinner? I've decided that like we'll just have to find out, because giving an answer, it's a trap.
He taught you well.
You know, totally. Also, I got for Christmas a little BB-8 play droid from Sphero, which is awesome and a lot of fun. And
My brother-in-law has one. It's super cool.
it is so cool and so much
Can
fun.
confirm. Can confirm.
And one of the best features is definitely you can say, hey, BB-8, it's a trap. And then he runs away.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
totally.
that's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah. He goes like, "Brrr," and runs off in the opposite direction.
Love it. That's so cool.
It is cool.
And this is why Star Wars is the best thing in the world.
Because it, like many other things, is a trap. Yep. To be continued. Or we could do with the whole like is that right? Is that how New Hope ends? Or is that Rocky?
Yo, Admiral Akbar.
Yo, Admiral Akbar, it's me, Adrian. Let's see.
Wait, was that Adrian speaking just then?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, are we stopping?
Yeah, where'd you go? Oh, dun 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 dun. Dun 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 na 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 na.